You think you know the gun that won the West, but the real story will blow holes through the myth. The Colt Peacemaker wasn't born perfect, and it wasn't made for everyone. It was expensive, flawed, and surrounded by lies that still echo through Hollywood and history. From collapsing frames to generals who refused to carry it. From lost origins to modern resurrection, these are 11 shocking truths about the Wild West's most famous weapon.
Just a bit sooner than y'all was expecting.
And why its legend refuses to die. Number 11, the month you couldn't eat. You slide the coins across the counter and feel your stomach twist because you just traded 30 days of your life for 6 chambers of salvation. It's 1873 and the West isn't wild, it's surgical. Every decision is calculated in blood or hunger. You work dawn to dusk for maybe $1 a day if you're lucky. Beans and hardtack keep you breathing, and then you see it behind the glass. The Colt Single Action Army, gleaming like a promise. $13.50. The number doesn't sound catastrophic until you do the arithmetic in sweat and calloused hands. That's a full month's wages for the average working man. Nearly a year's rent, the equivalent of spending $330 today on a single tool. But this isn't decoration or vanity. This is the razor-thin difference between dying alone in a ditch or walking away from trouble with your pulse still hammering in your throat. Most men couldn't afford it. The mathematics of survival created an instant hierarchy. The Peacemaker was never the gun of the people. It belonged to those who could purchase their own mortality insurance. Outlaws stole them from corpses and train cars. Lawmen received them from municipal budgets. But the common man, he made do with cheaper iron or no iron at all, hoping his luck would compensate for his empty holster. But if the price didn't kill you, the gun's dirty little secret might. Number 10, the weapon that fell apart in your hands. You're 3 days into the desert when you feel it, a shift, a looseness in the grip, and you realize your gun is trying to abandon you. The Peacemaker wasn't born in some sterile laboratory with engineers in white coats making calculated decisions. It was refined in the field, under fire, on horseback, in conditions that tested every rivet and spring, and somewhere in that crucible of real-world violence, Colt's designers made a choice. Perhaps they thought it wouldn't matter. Perhaps they never imagined men would ride as hard, shoot as often, or demand as much from their weapons as they did. 6 screws. That's the architectural foundation holding the trigger guard and backstrap to the frame. Simple, elegant, economical, except those screws possessed what can only be described as a death wish. They loosen constantly, relentlessly, inevitably. Vibration from riding, recoil from firing, even the subtle friction of leather against steel. It all conspired to unthread them, grain by grain. Cowboys learned to recognize the feel before they saw the damage. A slight wobble, a microscopic give. And if you didn't catch it early, your gun started shedding components like a snake molting skin. Picture yourself in a firefight, adrenaline screaming through your veins. You draw with practiced speed, aim at the threat, and your trigger guard drops into the dirt at your feet. That screwdriver they included with purchase, it wasn't courtesy or added value. It was survival equipment, as essential as ammunition. Cowboys, lawmen, outlaws, they all learned the same nightly ritual. Inspect your screws, tighten what's loose. Pray they hold until tomorrow. So you keep your gun together with a screwdriver and prayer. But how you load it, that's where history gets rewritten. If you're into uncovering the real stories behind famous legends, Go ahead and subscribe now. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Number 9. The Lie Hollywood Taught You. You watch the cowboy on screen load 5 rounds, spin the cylinder with theatrical flair, and rest the hammer on an empty chamber, and you're witnessing a modern myth disguised as historical accuracy. Every Western film ever produced shows the identical procedure. Load 1 chamber, skip the next, load 4 more. Rest the hammer on empty so if you drop the weapon, it doesn't blow your foot into meat and bone fragments. It's also completely wrong for the era. Here's what Colt actually printed in their 1874 instructions. Load all 6 chambers. Bring the hammer to the safety notch. Keep it positioned there until the moment arrives to fire. The United States Army Ordnance Manual echoed these instructions verbatim. Advertisements running through 1945 repeated the same guidance without variation. The Peacemaker was engineered, tested, and issued to cavalry units with the explicit expectation of full capacity carry. 6 rounds loaded, hammer resting in that quarter-cock safety position. Not 5, 6! That safety notch wasn't as reliable as they advertised. Drop the weapon hard enough directly onto the hammer, and that thin sliver of steel could fail. The firing pin could strike the primer. The gun could discharge into your leg or horse, or the man standing next to you. It was uncommon, but it happened, and when it did, someone lost toes, or worse. That's why modern shooters adopted the 5-round carry method generations later, not because it reflects historical practice, but because it's lawsuit-proof in our litigious era. The 5-round myth crystallized into accepted fact through repetition and Hollywood's influence. But the gun's most famous name? That wasn't Colt's doing at all. Number 8. The dealer who baptized a legend. You ask for it by name at the counter, and the clerk smiles knowingly, because that name was never supposed to exist in the first place. October 1874, Cincinnati, Ohio. A shrewd gun dealer named Benjamin Kittredge stares at Colt's newest revolver and recognizes an immediate problem. Nobody's going to walk into his establishment and confidently request a new model Army metallic cartridge revolving pistol. It's a bureaucratic mouthful, a tongue twister that kills sales before they start. It sounds like something ordered by committee, not carried by men. So Kittredge does what brilliant marketers have always done throughout history. He renames reality itself. He starts calling it the Peacemaker in his advertisements and catalogs, not because Colt instructed him to, not because it appears anywhere in official documentation, but because it sounds like manifest destiny compressed into 4 syllables. Colt never officially adopted the nickname, not for decades. They continued printing Single Action Army on paperwork and invoices, maintained the clunky military designation in their records. But the marketplace didn't care about corporate approval. The people had spoken, and the people demanded peacemakers. Kittredge also christened the Frontier 6-shooter, the Omnipotent, and several other firearms that have since faded into obscurity. He was the advertising genius of the Old West, the mind who understood that a weapon isn't merely steel and mechanism, it's narrative and emotion. Today, Peacemaker is inseparable from the gun itself. Colt eventually surrendered to the nickname, embraced it, marketed it aggressively, and that mythology reached the battlefield, but not in the hands you'd expect. Number 7. The general who refused the legend. You stand at the Little Bighorn with 200 men, all armed with peacemakers, except the one man whose name history would never forget. June 1876. Montana Territory, George Armstrong. Custer rides toward his appointment with immortality leading the 7th Cavalry. His troopers carry Colt single-action Army revolvers, serial numbers ranging from 4500 through 7527, each weapon inspected and approved by Ordnance Officer Orville W. Ainsworth. 200 peacemakers distributed among trained cavalry. This should be the gun's defining moment, the battle that proves its superiority and validates its adoption, except Custer himself carries something entirely different. A pair of British-manufactured Webley Bulldog revolvers, 455 caliber, nickel-plated with ivory grips. He trusts English engineering over American ingenuity, and he rides into the smoke and chaos, carrying that choice on his hips. We'll never know his reasoning. What we know with certainty, his men died with Colts gripped in their hands, and those weapons were claimed as prizes by Lakota and Cheyenne warriors after the massacre ended. The Peacemakers became trophies, symbols, ghosts haunting museum collections. Today, those OWA-marked Colts from Little Bighorn are the most valuable peacemakers in existence. They're not just firearms. They're relics of hubris, of empire meeting resistance, of manifest destiny colliding with reality. And the bitter irony etches itself into history. The gun that supposedly won the West was present for one of its most crushing defeats in every hand except the general's. Fast forward 70 years, and the Peacemaker finds itself in another war entirely. Number 6. The World War II. General with a cowboy's soul. You're watching tanks roll through France, crushing Europe's last fascist resistance, and the man commanding them is carrying a gun from another century, another war, another world entirely. World War II. Modern warfare at its most mechanized, most industrial, most impersonal. Soldiers carry M1 Garands, M1911 pistols, Thompson submachine guns. Steel and efficiency, designed for mass production and maximum lethality. But one general, George S. Patton, holsters a relic that predates the automobile, a Colt single-action army with ivory grips engraved with his initials and an eagle. He purchased it in 1916 for $50. He used it in Mexico, hunting Pancho Villa's lieutenants through desert terrain. And now, in 1944, he still wears it while coordinating armored divisions. Patton understood theater in ways his peers never grasped. He knew that wars are won by morale as much as munitions, by belief as much as bullets. His men needed to see a commander who believed in destiny and luck in the old ways, that connected past to present. That Peacemaker wasn't practical, it was symbolic. It communicated, I've been here before, I've survived worse. I carry the spirits of old warriors. Follow me into hell, and we'll walk out together. When a reporter made the mistake of asking about his pearl-handled pistols, Patton erupted with genuine fury. They're ivory. Only a pimp from a cheap New Orleans whorehouse would carry a pearl-handled pistol. The distinction mattered profoundly. Ivory meant history, legacy, continuity with warriors of previous generations. Pearl meant pretense and affectation. Patton lived in a universe where symbols carried tangible power. And yet, despite its immortality, the Peacemaker has died twice. Number 5. The gun that refused to stay buried. You walk into a Colt factory in 1941 and watch them shut down the production line, killing the most famous gun in American history because the world has evolved beyond it. World War II demands everything: steel, machinery, manpower, every resource converted toward the war effort. Colt halts Peacemaker production to focus on military contracts for modern weapons. And honestly, nobody objects. The gun is 68 years old at this point. It's a relic from another era. Single-action revolvers are outdated, outclassed by semi-automatic pistols and double-action designs that fire faster and more efficiently. Then, 1950s, America happens. Television explodes into living rooms across the nation. Westerns dominate primetime programming. Every night, millions of Americans watch cowboys draw peacemakers in shows like Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide. Movie theaters fill with John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Kirk Douglas, all wielding the unmistakable silhouette of the single-action army. Demand erupts from collectors, shooters, and Hollywood prop departments desperate for authentic weapons. Colt didn't want to resurrect it. The tooling was gone. The expertise had retired or died. It wasn't cost-effective to restart production for what they assumed was nostalgia, but the public wouldn't surrender. In 1956, Colt resurrects the Peacemaker. They call it the second generation. It sells immediately. Production runs until 1974, when they kill it again, convinced the market has finally exhausted itself. And again, demand forces resurrection in 1976. The Peacemaker has now been in continuous production since then. Part of that survival came from a brilliant piece of engineering that changed the frontier forever. Number 4. One bullet, 2 weapons, 0 excuses. You're packing for a month-long ride through hostile territory. and you realize you only need to carry one type of ammunition because someone finally did the mathematics of frontier logistics. 1877. Colt identifies a problem plaguing every cowboy, rancher, and lawman in the West. The Peacemaker fires 5 Colt cartridges. The Winchester model 1873 rifle, the most popular long gun across the frontier, fires 44 to 40 Winchester ammunition. Men are hauling 2 different cartridges, doubling their load weight, complicating their resupply, creating opportunities for fatal mistakes in the chaos of combat. Colt introduces the Frontier 6 shooter, a Peacemaker, specifically chambered in 44 to 40 Winchester. Suddenly, your rifle and your revolver consume identical ammunition. You can carry 1 caliber, 1 box of cartridges, 1 set of logistics. It's elegant, it's practical, and the Frontier adopts it with enthusiasm bordering on religious fervor. Over 70,000 Frontier 6 shooters are eventually produced. The cowboys at the OK Corral carried them. So did countless others whose names history forgot, but whose survival depended on this innovation. Winchester never reciprocated the cooperation. They refused to manufacture a rifle in .45 Colt, unwilling to undercut their own cartridge design. So the partnership remained one-sided, a brilliant idea hampered by corporate rivalry. When smokeless powder arrived years later, ballistics shifted dramatically, and new calibers emerged that made both .45 Colt and 44 to 40 Winchester obsolete for military applications. But in 1877, this was revolutionary thinking. Yet despite all this brilliance, the Peacemaker's military career was shockingly brief. Number 3. The 20-year lie. You hear it called the gun that won the West, and you check the official records and realize the United States Army only used it for 19 years, 1873 to 1892. That's the entirety of its official military service, less than 2 decades as the standard issue sidearm, adopted after competitive trials, issued to cavalry units, deployed to the frontier during the Indian Wars, and then replaced by the Colt M 1892 double-action revolver. The Peacemaker's official military career ends before the 19th century does, discontinued and retired like any other piece of equipment that outlives its usefulness. So how did it earn the mythical title, the gun that won the West? Not through military campaigns or government contracts, through civilian hands, through Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows touring globally, mythologizing the frontier for audiences who'd never seen it, through dime novels and stage plays that transformed history into entertainment, through the thousands of lawmen, ranchers, outlaws, and ordinary people who purchased them with their own money, carried them daily, and used them in situations the Army never encountered. The military moved on because technology moved on. Double-action revolvers allowed faster firing without manually cocking the hammer. Semi-automatic pistols held more rounds and reloaded faster. The Peacemaker's single-action design, cock the hammer, pull the trigger, repeat, was outdated the moment John Browning started sketching his M 1911. The Army recognized this reality and pivoted accordingly. But not every Peacemaker was created equal. Some were forged for legends. Number 2. The 1%. You hold a standard Peacemaker in one hand and an engraved masterpiece in the other, and you realize they're not even the same species of weapon. Colt understood their market with surgical precision. The working man received blued steel and walnut grips, functional, reliable, anonymous. But the wealthy? The powerful, the famous, they received art. Master engravers were employed by Colt to transform revolvers into heirlooms that would outlive their owners. Gold inlays, spelling names in script, silver filigree cascading down barrels. Only 1% of first-generation Peacemakers received this treatment. Consider those numbers. Out of 357,859 guns manufactured between 1873 and 1941, fewer 3,600 were engraved. Colt gave them to heads of state, captains of industry, lawmen who'd made national headlines. They were marketing, prestige, and power combined into a single package. Samuel Colt himself established this tradition, gifting engraved revolvers to influential figures as publicity that couldn't be purchased through normal advertising. Each engraved gun was a walking advertisement, a conversation piece, a symbol of arrival. If you owned one, you didn't use it, not really. These guns were too valuable, too recognizable, too beautiful to risk in a dusty holster or a smoky gunfight. They lived in display cases, locked cabinets, behind glass. They were symbols of wealth that couldn't be deployed without destroying their value. The ultimate contradiction, a weapon too precious to fire. And now, in the 21st century, the Peacemaker achieved something no one saw coming. Number 1. The state that made it official. You're standing in the Arizona state capitol in 2011, watching lawmakers vote to make a 138-year-old revolver the official firearm of an entire state. Most states have official birds, flowers, trees, symbols chosen for their beauty or ecological significance. Arizona decided it needed an official gun. The Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association surveyed residents. What Old West firearm should represent us? The Peacemaker won by a 38% margin, not even close. Senate Bill 1610 was introduced, debated with surprising passion, and passed on the final day of the legislative session. Governor Jan Brewer signed it into law without hesitation. This wasn't nostalgia or sentimentality. This was identity. Arizona was declaring, we are still the frontier. We are still the West. And this gun, more than any rifle, shotgun, or modern pistol, embodies who we were and who we remain. It's a political statement, a cultural one, a defiant rejection of anyone who thinks the Old West is dead and buried. Critics called it performative, dangerous, glorifying violence. But Arizona didn't blink or apologize. Arizona became the second state with an official firearm, following Utah's adoption of the M1911. The Peacemaker now sits beside the cactus wren and the saguaro cactus as an official symbol of statehood. And every year, Colt still manufactures them. Over 150 years of continuous production, with only 2 brief interruptions, 2 cancellations, countless imitators. But the original refuses to die, because the Peacemaker was never just a weapon. Every legend carries a shadow, and the Peacemaker's is long. It shaped the West, Hollywood, and the myths we still chase today. If you enjoyed peeling back those layers, subscribe for more history that hits harder than a 6-gun at sunrise.